All right, so one more poll. So let me go ahead and I'm going to close this poll and I'm going to open up one more. I want to understand if you have System Center Configuration Manager installed in your environment. So give me a heads up. So I expect a lot of you will. Okay, good. So we have a lot of systems administrators, a lot of config manager customers. So again, I want to drill down and talk to you about some of the key impacts of hybrid cloud on your lives, primarily as systems administrators, but I'm going to give you some tips for how you can gain some visibility with the tools that you already own and how Cireson complements that. But I want to unpack some of these business problems, and I have sort of a ridiculous but interesting story about a company that discovered they were grossly overspending on IT and how they how on cloud and how they got that under control. So I'll be peppering some tips all through here. But let's just getting back to where we were on the deck here. Let's just get down to the meat of our discussion. So when we think about cloud, if I go back even 4 or 5 years ago, I can remember customers um, and even IT folks asking, is this cloud thing for real? Is this going to stick? And now we're 5 years into the future, and we know there's no doubt this is for real. This is absolutely going to stick. And in fact, Gartner has discovered through years of survey that hybrid cloud is basically the norm. In fact, hybrid cloud, which means investment in on-premises resources like private cloud, as well as infrastructure as a service and SaaS and PaaS and SaaS and public cloud, will be where most organizations live. Uh, top that with the fact that mobile devices have to be productive now. That we also had that reality that some years ago the battle in IT was to keep those mobile devices off the network. Now it's just how can we make them productive and secure all at the same time. Uh, Bring your own device basically means that we've got licensed apps and business data that are beyond our corporate network. The perimeter as we used to know it, a firewall or a proxy, is no longer the perimeter. The perimeter is now, wherever that mobile device lives and the application that we're using to as the window into our data. And if we look at the opportunity around the Internet of Things, IoT is a billion-dollar plus industry at this point. So they're saying 4 trillion in revenue ops by 2020. And if we look at the IoT world, the industrial side and the personal side kind of meet in the mobile device. People bring their personal device to work and they want to use it for business, and now we have an interesting hybrid of sorts right there. And we have to manage those devices. So when we look at IoT in the world of ShadowIT, in the world of unmanaged IT, we see a lot of unmanaged consumer IoT in the workplace. People using apps, like a OneDrive or Dropbox to share data. Potentially using their expense report as a means to buy cloud tools to drive around IT. So we find that SaaS is playing a growing role in business, but we also find that IT is not always involved in that growing role of SaaS, which is a risk not only for the business for sure, but for you as an administrator, as somebody responsible for corporate governance and asset management. This is a gap in visibility for you, and I want to talk about how you can close that. Data itself as an asset is really important to think about. Personally identifiable information, social security number, credit card, et cetera, finding its way out to cloud data sources where I can share it with anybody, via a simple link. That's a big deal, and that problem right there is really beyond the full scope of this discussion. But as you're thinking about the big picture, that right there is a little bit scary in and of itself. Certainly something to think about. But identifying who's using the cloud and what in the cloud they're using is really important. And I'll talk to you about there's two very prominent ways that come to mind that you can address this. And I'm going to talk to you about the technical way. And then I'm going to talk to you about a very unsexy, non-technical way that's also very effective in identifying who's using the cloud and how they're doing it. So what's available to you is going to depend widely on who you are and where you work. But at the end of the day, gaining visibility into the cloud is the key piece. We can't count what we don't know about, right? So we have to get our eyes on our cloud assets, on our mobility situation. Now, if you're a config manager admin, which many of you have indicated you are, you have some capability here if you're using even the native capabilities of config man, or better yet, maybe using Microsoft Intune. You also want to get your hands around ShadowIT, around some of that spending that's happening outside of IT. You can't really fully do that with Config Manager. I would argue there's a broader set of tools out there around security and identity you have to delve into to get to additional answers. But the impacts to discovery are going to be fairly obvious. So the data sources we have, and if we think about the data sources we have, so if you're a config manager admin, that's an obvious rich data source. Active Directory, an obvious rich data source. If you're using Office 365, there's licensing information right there. If we're using Salesforce, for example, that's a SaaS app. It has a billing API. We should be able to get data from there. The question tends to be twofold. Number one, understanding what the data source is, and then number two, understanding if I have a tool or a workaround I can use to extract data from that source to get to the information I need to do some intelligent calculation. Existing processes in place are going to be an impact, because existing processes, having some governance in place where somebody in your organization has to approve the act of somebody spending money for a SaaS tool, even if it's an inexpensive SaaS tool, is going to be a big deal. And we'll talk about the process gaps and how you can backtrack, kind of walk that back, as our politicians say today, to identify how to address that problem from a process perspective. And then what your business objectives are out of this. If you're preparing for a Microsoft audit, for example, which is a pretty common occurrence in the enterprise, right, with your annual true-up, or if it's some other kind of audit, if it's Oracle or something different, that's going to play a role in your discovery. But let's get down to ShadowIT. So I mentioned ShadowIT. I assume you've all heard of ShadowIT. That's IT spending outside of IT control. So I want to give you some numbers, and I want to tell you a story. So more than 80% of corporate employees admit that they've used some sort of unauthorized SaaS, whether that's Dropbox or they've lit up a little Salesforce subscription. So we know it's happening on a widespread basis. There's some additional stats that won't make you feel any better. So more than 30% of spending being outside of CIO control is actually fairly significant. Because as an IT organization, we need to demonstrate value, and when we see money going outside of IT control to purchase technology, it's negatively affecting our influence on the overall organization and negatively impacting our ability to have a positive impact on the bottom line. As much as 35% of SaaS apps are actually used without oversight, so people doing whatever they want from whatever device they want, with no consequences around the data. So if I can open data and I can save it, in a freeware Office program out to Dropbox or OneDrive or wherever, I've now potentially leaked corporate data outside my organization. And as config manager admins, I know that you understand this is a big problem. So getting control of the device is a big step, because if we can get control of the device, then we can have potentially some measure of control over the data with the right subscriptions to Microsoft identity components like EMS or a third-party equivalent. And the ShadowIT is actually only expected to increase. So the real key is helping your organization understand how they can kind of walk back any gaps in process and get some governance in place. So as the growth happens, IT has their finger on the growth and they can have an impact on that growth from a management perspective, from a data security perspective going forward. But that lack of manageability basically means that you have a discovery hurdle to jump over. So whether it's a SaaS app like Salesforce or Office 365, or maybe we see in development organizations all the time that they throw down a credit card and they start using AWS, Amazon. And that represents a more significant problem to you, doesn't it? Because now they've got virtual machines potentially where they can deploy licensed software, and you may not have a config manager agent on there because they intentionally didn't tell you about it. And as that dev and test workload becomes an easy place for them to light up new production services, to share information with others, you've potentially got licensing gaps and holes in your data. But and for you, that means you're not getting a complete picture of your install base, because being able to throw a credit card down and deploy a virtual machine with a few clicks means that virtual machine sprawl in the cloud sense is very real and very easy to see transpire very quickly, and it may quickly begin to feel like there's not a lot you can actually do about that situation. So incomplete data is just never a good thing. You can't come to an answer if you don't have all the pieces of the equation. And ITAM without cost and risk reduction, it's just another log on the fire of the problem that's undermining our credibility as IT. So I want to talk to you about a true story around the impact of ShadowIT in the real world, and I want to talk to you about a very non-technical solution that a company used to solve this problem. And then I'm going to talk to you about some of the technology that's out there, and I've got an acronym in particular I think that you may not be aware of, that you will want to be aware of, that gives you a very powerful technical solution for gaining visibility into ShadowIT, into your cloud consumption, and getting your arms around the problem at an enterprise level. But let's talk for a minute about this true story. So I was at an IT asset management conference talking to an asset manager, and he was explaining how one day somebody from the finance department, a director or somebody important, walks into the CIO's office and tells him that they are officially over budget. They've spent beyond their IT budget. And he says, well, I have the budget right here. I know what I spent. We're definitely not over the IT budget. And he says, well, I disagree, and I'll bring you the numbers to prove it. So he schedules some time a little later in the day, and he comes back with a pile of expense reports. And he starts going through these reports and showing all the little bits of IT spending that are happening on expense reports under signing authority. So whether these people had $50 authority or $500 authority, a lot of people were spending money within their own signing authority so they could avoid delays related to approval. That's why a lot of people go to the trouble to buy cloud resources outside of IT anyway, right? They're not bad people. They are good people trying to do a better job, and they don't feel like they can get the job done through IT. So anyway, in the course of this discussion, it's made apparent to the CIO they have, by simply looking at credit card receipts, identified a massive pile of unknown spending, off-budget spending. And so they went through the line items there, and in an afternoon managed to identify the top sources of off-budget spending. And I believe Amazon was number one in this story. And so they took all of that spending, added it up, went back to the cloud provider, Amazon I believe it was in this case, and negotiated an organized, centralized way to control this through a subscription. And they knocked somewhere around 30-35% right off the top. And also, so that's important thing number one. They negotiated a discount because now they had visibility. Number two, they were able to go back and backtrack on the process aspect of this and inject some governance into the equation. So now we've got a discount price and we have governance that with minimal friction allows people to consume these assets as they need them, but it also put accountability in place. So through cost center, through org structure, they could pin down who was using resources and in what quantity. So chargeback could happen to those departments. And that more or less solve their problem, you know, so it's not a trivial thing necessarily to get the process in place, but by simply using credit card receipts, they identified the scope of a problem that turned out to be a pretty big problem in terms of raw numbers, and so that's kind of the non-technical way you can deal with that. So let's talk about the technology for just a minute, though. So getting into all your data sources is really important, and mobile device and mobile application management are really important. So with Configuration Manager, we can get some basic mobile device management in place. We can get some mobile application management in place. Now, when we add something like Microsoft Intune to the equation, now things become much more powerful. Now we have some policy-based capability, so we can overlay some policy around how people are leveraging their mobile devices and what we are able to remove from that device when that user separates from the organization. If we go a step further and we look at enterprise tools like Microsoft's Enterprise Mobility and Security, which gives us access. If we look at some of the premium SKUs there, we can get access to things like what used to be called RMS, so information protection now it is. We can begin to put some policies around the data itself. We can begin to classify our documents. So when somebody opens a document in Microsoft Word on a mobile phone, it's now a managed app, and I can prevent them from right-clicking and pasting from Word into something else. I can prevent them from saving into their personal OneDrive, into their Dropbox. Now I've got mobility management, and so whether I'm using Intune and EMS for my MDM and my mobile app management, or I'm using AirWatch or something else, I think the most important element there is just understanding that your perimeter is now that device, that application, that document, that user's identity is the window into all of that. So Config Manager as the basis with Intune integration and other tools is whichever tools those may be, is a great solution for getting your visibility there. And if you don't have that visibility, then you have some fundamental problems to deal with. So this one in the middle here, Cloud App and Usage Discovery. So discovering who is using cloud applications can be very challenging, but there are some tools out there that will help you with this. So Microsoft themselves, for example, has an agent you can deploy, Cloud App Discovery, that will, on a per machine basis, identify cloud apps that people are using, websites they're visiting, etc. So it's watching and looking at a big reference database to see what known cloud sources they are accessing, and then it presents it all up in your enterprise Microsoft portal. That agent-based solution is not my favorite way to deal with it. I'm going to talk to you about cloud app security in just a minute. There's a new acronym I want to share with you, and what I think is sort of a better enterprise solution, upcoming industry. But more on that in just a second. So cloud APIs, everything in this world, I feel these days, has gone to a RESTful API. So you've got a lot of tools out there that give you access, whether it's Office 365 and the Graph API, which is a RESTful API, or Amazon, or Salesforce, you name it. They've all got some sort of billing API that if you want to pull those, you pull that information into a centralized asset management tool, assuming that tool is capable. You can begin to centralize some of that billing data and get your hands around some of that SaaS usage. But let's talk a little more about this center bullet here around discovering your cloud consumption. So we talked about detecting, the platforms that you have in use out there with tools like System Center. And for virtual machines, System Center Config Manager is actually a really good tool for identifying virtual machines running in Azure and Amazon if you can actually discover those virtual machines. And I'll show you how to identify the footprint of an Azure VM very quickly in case you don't know. That'll only take a minute. Here's something I want you to write down. Cloud Access Security Broker. So this is a nascent industry. This is a growing but fairly new industry, a couple of years old. It's pronounced CASB. And what a Cloud Access Security Broker does, and Microsoft has their own CASB tool. It's called Cloud App Security. And what it does is it's an on-prem solution. So basically you have a system that sits there and you feed it the logs from your firewalls, from your proxies, and it's going to tell you what cloud apps people are using. So it begins to address the visibility problem we have with ShadowIT, because it's identifying what people are accessing as they go out through the organization's points of egress in your environment. So definitely a very powerful tool if your organization is not already using it. So you should mention that acronym to management within your organization, and if they haven't heard of it, get out on the internet and begin to educate them. This is absolutely a powerful way to gain some control over ShadowIT. And then I mentioned that story about paper trails, as unexciting as that may be. With our finance organization, and asset management is often located, positioned within the finance department. Paper trails are something that finance people do very well. So giving them a list of things to look for, you could probably write, scratch down on a piece of paper the top 10, commercial SaaS or virtualization platforms. If you wrote Amazon, Salesforce, Box, Dropbox, and 4 or 5 others on a piece of paper, I bet they would uncover some spending in many organizations. So something to think about. I mentioned discovering cloud apps through your tool. So let's have a look just real quickly here. If I'm on a Windows box, so I'm on an Azure virtual machine right here. You're config manager admins, many of you. If you're not, this is very non-technical. So if I just look in computer management, or I launch my service manager, services.msv, I can find my Windows services, and on every Azure virtual machine, you're going to have that service running right there. So because that is a service, it also exists in the Windows registry. And if you're a System Center customer, if you're using Config Manager today, which I think 100% of you indicated you were, or nearly 100%, we can go down into the registry under HKey Local Machine System Current Control Set Services, and I can find that service, and I could use, in the case of System Center, I'd use something like regkey to moff to turn that into a custom discovery perhaps, but I could identify that Windows Azure guest agent there in my registry. So now I've immediately got that sort of visibility. You have something similar you can look at in Amazon as well, by the way. I also appreciate that is not a complete solution, right? That's giving you some visibility at virtual machines. That's not going to give you visibility into all of the places where you can't install agents. Into PaaS, into platform as a service, where your devs are deploying websites and the like, or service bus type capabilities, microservices architecture, and that's where APIs come into play. You're going to have to look at a billing API to extract what sort of usage is coming out, which first requires a layer of discovery, right? You have to go find which services they're using and what those subscription IDs are. Basically, that often winds up back there in that ugly paper trail I talked about with credit card receipts and finance, just to figure out who's using what. But if your organization is subscribing to any of those premium Microsoft services, Cloud Access Security Broker, which you could even light up on a trial basis, by the way. If you don't have it, you can light up Cloud App Security on a 30-day trial basis and get some visibility. That's pretty easy to do. So visibility through policy is another thing. When people break the rules, I mentioned that I firmly believe that people involved in shadow IT are usually just good people trying to do a better job, and it's a good idea to not punish them for being dutiful employees. So incorporating as a service type offerings into your ITAM policies, into your corporate IT policies. Write out policies for how people gain that sort of approval, but I think just as importantly, and I have seen this work in the real world a time or two, implement some sort of amnesty program. Let your organization know, hey, we've got a process gap here. We've come to learn there's a lot of spending happening outside of budget. We know that you're doing this with good intentions. If you're somebody who's doing this kind of spending, bring this to our attention so we can get this centralized. We can negotiate some favorable pricing in new contracts as an organization as opposed to one-offs on your expense reports. And that amnesty program, sort of encouraging people to come forward, that you appreciate their efforts and now they can help you further by allowing you to save money. It's a great way to do this, to have a policy that's not punitive, right? Food for thought. I just wanted to throw something out there because we've all got this problem, and I've seen this sort of approach work because it's not punitive in nature. It just encourages people to keep being good employees. But when I think about all the customers that I visit with, and if I go back 3, 4, 5 years into the earlier days of cloud, the most common risk with orgs new to cloud, it's this right here. It's the fact that many organizations didn't have a policy in place, and so there's just no governance. There was a lot of expense report spending that happened some years ago that's been allowed to continue. And so this is a problem we all have to recognize. It's just a new kind of sprawl. It's not virtual machines in VMware and Hyper-V anymore. Now it's VMs and SaaS and PaaS, whatever sort of point solutions folks can pull together to solve problems. And so by getting this governance in place, you're going to, number one, be able to consolidate the number of tools that you're using and get folks onto some approved corporate tools, and then hopefully wrap a layer of management around those tools, begin to negotiate fewer org-wide contracts that allow you to reduce the spending on a reduced number of tools. It's just a win-win-win, but it's all about governance at the end of the day. So if you don't feel like you're, and I'm curious, just by a show of hands, if you don't feel like your organization has, fully has governance in place for your cloud spending, I'd be interested to see a hand or two here just to understand the scope of that problem within our audience here today. Something I see quite a lot of out in the field. So I wanted to talk to you for a second about data as an asset. So I mentioned, mobile devices out there. Mobile devices allow people to share and save information outside our corporate resources if we don't have anything in place. So Privacy Shield is a new proposal that's replacing Safe Harbor effectively, and basically this proposal ensures protection of personal data of European Union citizens as well. So if you're a multinational, these are some new rules for organizations that have European branches, and it basically mandates certain types of data access restrictions around data access by role, by location. For example, in Germany, personal data in Germany has to stay inside Germany. They have some sovereignty laws there. So why is it super important that data be treated as an asset and secured appropriately? Because the fines for non-compliance are massive, into the millions of dollars. It is beyond painful if you're not compliant. So just know that the privacy laws are moving. So some of these advances in tools I'm talking about are actually really, really important that the larger IT organization and the corporation as a whole get on the train, because the impact will be considerable. You can actually learn more about Privacy Shield out at the URL below there if you want to have a look. It's interesting just to understand the impact to your organization, if nothing else. So I want to talk to you about the future of asset management at Cireson. So for a long time, we've specialized in service and asset management. We've been working primarily with System Center Service Manager. We have been expanding into the world of Configuration Manager with our free apps. What we have coming soon, later in Q4, is the next generation of asset management for System Center from Cireson. So this is a solution designed more to leverage the data from System Center Configuration Manager, a tool we know many organizations have. It will also consume data from Office 365 and a variety of enterprise data sources. In fact, this solution will incorporate some what we'd call universal connectors that can consume data from SQL data sources and from flat file data sources really easily. So it gives you capability to bring in data from a variety of enterprise sources and to begin to focus on some key scenarios where you can save the org money. So the software true-up management around Microsoft is really first and foremost the scenario we were targeting. But in the process of gathering a lot of licensing data around Microsoft, we get a lot of ancillary data that allows us to help you address other scenarios. You're going to have good source data there that can help you with Windows 10 readiness planning, with Office migration scenarios, with SQL Server upgrade, migration, and planning. In fact, one of the most common workloads we see going into Microsoft Azure is SQL Server. So having some planning capability there could be potentially a really big deal, because as you have, what you're going to see in your organization is as 2017 comes along, you're going to see hardware renewal cycles coming up, licensing refreshes happening, and those are going to be opportunities where the organization can ask the question, do I want to go buy more hardware and update licenses, or do I just want to buy something in the cloud and move on? And especially around those hardware refresh cycles, if you're running big virtualization, high density virtualization, these are all going to be opportunities to leverage a tool like Cireson's upcoming asset management solution to save the org money. Just some high-level characteristics. So we're developing there a solution designed to run anywhere. So whether you're running in Azure, Amazon, VMware, we don't really care where it runs. We just wanted to make sure the solution would run anywhere. Connectors that will allow you to consume data from a variety of sources. So if you're a System Center customer, Configuration Manager, Active Directory, that's all great. If you're running other enterprise tools, maybe you're using SolarWinds for network monitoring, you'll be able to use our Universal SQL connector to bring in data to help deal with information there. But initially, the solution is going to be very focused on software asset management, very focused on the Microsoft catalog, and you're going to see a pretty rapid release cycle. We are an agile development shop, so you'll see expanding capabilities as we begin with focus on the Microsoft true-up scenario, the Microsoft software catalog, and we branch out into other publishers and eventually into broader asset management capabilities, hardware, financial, etc. But this initial solution is really intended to provide a foundation for mature asset management that's cloud friendly, that's platform independent, and very affordably priced. So Cireson's really made our name as an organization as a value provider, which we intend to do with our new asset management solution. So you'll be able to get a look at this in a few weeks' time by the current plan. But I would absolutely encourage you to take away what I've said today. Work with your IT leadership, with your business leadership, to implement and enforce some cloudware policies. I think we have to embrace private cloud as a business enabler, but you really have to work with IT to expand your discovery footprint, so you get better visibility into what you're using. And for your asset managers, asset managers live and die, and IT people are not completely dissimilar from this. Asset managers live and die by the amount of value that they're able to demonstrate into to the organization based on the license, the penalties that they've avoided, that the spending they've reduced or eliminated, and it's not bad for us as systems administrators to demonstrate that same sort of ROI. If we can get visibility into our cloud usage, if we can provide some guidance on data security, this is all opportunity to add value to the organization in a very transitional time in this world. We're seeing all of the traditional brick and mortar IT go away, so this is your chance to share some insight with the broader org. But as I mentioned, our next generation asset management solution is coming in just a few weeks' time. If you have some interest, you'd like to get an early look, we do have some opportunities for some short consultation to help you understand what your greatest challenges might be and how we might be able to help you and to provide some preliminary guidance. But we'd also love to get you an early look at our next generation asset management solution when that comes available here in Q4. So if you're interested, when you get the post survey, definitely let us know and come out and have a look at what we have coming. But I expect the discussion to be evolving. So come visit us on social media. We're at Team Cireson on Twitter, Team Cireson on Facebook, Team Cireson on Vimeo. So if you haven't been out to Vimeo.com, we have a massive video library there of our existing System Center solutions. So no doubt you can poke around there and find a few things that perhaps you've not seen before as well. But I appreciate your time today. Look forward to any questions you might have. I'll definitely be on the channel here for a few minutes after the session if any questions come to mind. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on a future Cireson webinar. Thanks for coming.